for being here. It is even the 9th of July. I'm here as the UHLG Assurance and Risk Committee. I've apologies for this meeting from David Mealy, but Colin's here as introduced. Welcome, Colin. Thank you for being here. And from Jackie Bird, who is in Cyprus, in a bar where everybody knows her name and she knows everybody else's name. And we've been in touch this week about people who've started to express interest and coming to join the team. But Jack is not here for the meeting today. We've got minutes of the meeting from our last time together in this format, which was on the 4th of June. As we find as newcomers to this committee, all find there's every meeting's different, but there's a consistent core of rolling business around operational issues and risks for which we seek assurance. Everyone content with the minutes of the 4th of June, please. To approve, thank you. Approved. On the action tracker, we have the issue about the 15-minute that came up about 15-minute triage in ED, and we've got an agenda item on that today. So that comes back today. There's nothing else on the action tracker there. I've not been notified of any urgent matters arising. So we can go straight into the site reports. When this agenda came, Jonathan, I'm struck about all these different modules and so on that you're looking after at the moment, but over to you to cover Liverpool Heart and Chest, Broad Green Diagnostic Treatment Centre and its component parts.
Thanks, Chair. So probably that's a good precursor to probably my update. I think when you look at the report, the risk profile is largely unchanged. But what I will say is, given the complexities of those different statutory organisations, risk registers, and all the other elements that sit alongside it, I'm taking it as positive that we haven't seen a significant change in that risk profile, given where we are. But I'm hoping in Q2 and Q3 we may be able to lower those number of risks and really move on some of the quality agenda associated with it. So if you look across the report, we have 16 high-level risks. The new risk that's been added to the report this month is a risk related to non-criteria to reside length of stay. And that really supports kind of the transformation piece that we need to look at, where we look at Broad Green in a frailty pathway, a reablement point of view. I think there's a real look for me as a HMB and with the nursing teams to look at a therapy-led service that's kind of driving that length of stay down. So we've raised the risk now, probably as more of a trigger of we need to work with Leanne and Pete around what are we doing at the acute sites as well as on the Broad Green site to really improve that pathway and make sure we're moving patients on. Obviously, it will be multifactorial, but it's a real key opportunity for us as a site. When you look at the overall risk profile, again, I'll highlight from a quality metrics point of view, there are only 3 risks that are rated above 12. The Boston recall, which is has been the same for the last couple of months, but is expected to close by month 3. Because we would have got through all of those cohorts of patients and then they'll be back to a business as usual point of view overall. So again, that should come down. The second is in relation to an urgent and advice service for the registrars from an LHCH point of view. And again, we're trialling the digital service at the moment with our aortic service line, and we've seen positive feedback. So I'm hoping that one will also close. The non-criteria to reside I've just touched upon, so it's an opportunity and a risk at the same time. But from our HMB point of view, then there isn't really any quality metrics that I'd bring out as saying that is a statistical outlier or things that I'm worried about at this stage. However, I will note, although there aren't 12, there are a significant number of 10s and 11s that are being managed by site. When you look at it from a finance and performance point of view, and I want to put the lens on really on transformation when I look at finance and performance. LHCH, we would have noted in previous months had seen a lower income for Wales and Isle of Man. That started to now catch up, so that's a good thing. I've talked to Manoj about engaging with the commissioners and the medical workforce in and around that, because I think there is a bit about us engaging and making sure that demand keeps flowing in the right direction, but we need to make sure those pathways are clear. But for LHCH in a finance and a performance point of view, the main thing is CIP delivery. So we've got a number of identified schemes, but it's about now transacting those schemes and moving them through to delivery. From a Broad Green point of view, non-pay and CIP again are the two recurring themes. But for Broad Green, as I've echoed in a couple of different meetings, because of what those services provide, it's really focusing on the non-pay controls that we work with Aintree and the Royal around, and then looking at CIP overall, which are bigger transformational schemes. So frailty, theatres, ward closures as the big opportunities. So I'm not expecting Broad Green to really catch up in the first couple of months. I'm thinking more at the end of the financial year, we'll see some of those bigger schemes catching up if we're able to demonstrate that it's the right thing across the group. From a DTC point of view, we mainly covered off by some non-recurrent elements, but I am positive that there are a number of different CIP schemes, as well as opportunities and risks that we can effectively manage. When you look at across the DTC, and Beth will highlight this, of the regulatory compliance elements, it's about focusing those standards. We've just got the RC path review. It's not in the report this month, but it will be something we need to review and address. And I know David has invited Lord Carter next week, or the week after next, to try and come and visit us and look at how we can influence that pathology pathway as well. So there's a couple of rounded elements of DTC that I think there is opportunities and risk on how we expand, but we need to make sure that the regulatory compliance sits amongst that. When we look at month 3 across all of those different elements as well, they are looking that they are moving positively in the right direction. For LHCH, again, CIP has improved, but we're not where we need to be in relation to our cumulative target, and the same thing with Broad Green and DTC. From a people perspective, I'll highlight sickness absent has been on the rise, and you'll see stress and anxiety. That has been also doubly impacted by our HR support, which is highlighted as a 12 at this moment in time. We are again looking that the corporate TOM will get into place over Q2, and we're looking at any mitigation arrangements that we can support sickness and also staff support at the moment. Where we've got these significant periods of change, you'll see in my report I've highlighted the need to really look at the key themes for freedom to speak up at the moment, because what I don't want to do is miss out on the opportunities of listening to staff. I personally, and I think I mentioned this in the last ARC update, have done, I think I'm now up to 14 engagement sessions across the whole of the HMB, and that's to senior leaders, consultants, and a couple of wider stakeholders perspective. And I've just sent out a check-in survey that to all staff to say, were they useful or were they not? I'm going to get mixed reviews, but comms is good comms in terms of making sure that the people feel like I am listening to them, picking up those different elements as well. But from a people perspective, I'll highlight sickness absence, I can't speak today, as well as the corporate services change is the biggest risk, but you will see there's some niche services, allergy, immunology, which do sit there as a 12 as well, which will be interdependent performance risks as well. In terms of digital, again, there's a risk on there that's currently at 12, but I expect that one to come down next month. Important things in a positive perspective. I know Matt's not on the call, but from a digital perspective, they came in prior to the TOMs being implemented, and they've done a really good job of keeping continuity of service. We've seen the DSPT audits improve. We've seen a lot of people and contacts really familiarise themselves with the LHCH site. So a real credit to Matt and his team. And as with all of us, EPR engagement over the next 2 years is going to be fundamental. So Manoj, as the medical director on site, is really pushing that kind of responsibility with the clinical teams, because if we don't start now, it's not going to land in 2 or 3 years' time. In terms of estates, you will see in the report, and you're all in a hot environment at the moment, our theatre estate has been known to be a risk on the LHCH site. It's multifactorial, being it's probably the oldest part of our estate overall. We've had the theatre ventilation units changed, and with the EPRR heat warnings at the moment, humidity has been a factor for us continuing with activity. Fortunately or unfortunately, David's first day at Heart and Chest was when we had humidity issues and loss of activity on that day. But given he's an engineer, he did offer to put on some scrubs and get and solve it for us, but I did hold off at that opportunity at this stage. We have seen an interim fix go in for the last week or so, and we haven't seen any downtime in activity, David. So just so you are aware, and on your next visit, hopefully we won't have those issues.
Don't you worry. You'll want me in the end here. You will fail to deliver, because I know who's trying to deliver it for you. So you'll have to come back begging.
So on the theatre estate bit, and I know in the controls and context, and Andy and Beth raised this to me as well when we were reviewing papers. For me, there's a bit of the short term and the long term. So as I've said for LHCH, the theatre estate is probably the most pressing risk when we look at capital investment. But when you look at it, it's a £40 million investment overall. So we do need to look at how do we do it within our CDEL limits. But we're having interim issues where that theatre estate, you can't solve it with sticking plasters. We need to get to the longer term solution overall. We are looking at different commercial investment opportunities, but they do come at different costs. And a real positive that I wanted to raise as an update today, as well as potentially in private board next week, is that we are hopeful that LHCH might be included in the second wave of the Advanced Foundation Trust, which might allow us to have more capital freedoms. If that capital freedom opportunity comes along, it may allow me to do more in that theatre environment space as well. So I think for us as a board, when we come back in a week or so's time, it's to discuss what are the opportunities for Advanced Foundation Trust, and also the segue into integrated health organisation for cardiovascular disease and respiratory overall. The final thing that I'd probably note is in a transformation space, you will see that we are continuing to work on visions, identity and brand on site. And really some of the bigger transformation schemes is where I see the opportunity for SIP delivery and improvements in quality and safety. Really for us, it's how do you do both concurrently and keep staff motivated in that same direction. So overall, I think a good position for our HMB to be in. Stationary, as I say, in a risk profile point of view, I'm taking as a positive, but for me, it's around how does that change in Q2 and in Q3. Underlying performance financial risks is probably the key risk for most HMBs in the organisation, but it's how do we do it in a sustainable way. And then just a final comment about decisions made. You will see that there was a couple of reports, complaints, fire safety and health and safety, as well as a research governance update that just highlights a couple of things on approval processes that we've done as a BAU kind of business as well. So that is an overview from my point of view, but I'm happy to take any questions. I've done it as quickly as possible, but the paper is in the pack for any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. I should have said it before starting the site update. If you remember last month when we were together, we spent over half the meeting going through the finance stuff at the start. And we're trying to get into a better rhythm of governance with what discussion we have at board when we're all there, what discussion we have here, what discussion we have at finance committee. Finance committee met yesterday, I know, and therefore I thought when David Gilbert's not here, but today I would have turned to him. When we've gone through all the site updates, if you could just summarise, building on what the managing directors have said, the overall financial position, just close that context for us in this meeting. That would be helpful. Got David here first, and then I'll come to you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, I see this as a really big risk in terms of the theatre air conditioning. I would like to meet with the consulting engineers that have been used. By all means, have our own estates people there, but I don't want them ruling the roost. I want to talk directly to the consulting engineers and we've got to get on with this and get it fixed and sorted, because, you know, to lose cardiac surgery, because what bothers me about it with the Isle of Man, with Wales, etc., it doesn't take you long to lose your reputation, and we've got to get a solution. So I want to see the consulting engineers that our estates have been used. By all means, you can have our own estates people there, but they can have a back seat. I want to be talking to the people that are coming up with a solution. Thanks.
Okay, just on that point, Leanne, I was at Crowd Street yesterday morning. There was a question yesterday about humidity in the theatres and potential disruption to the elective programme.
This
I don't know
issue,
if that happened or not.
this issue is just going to get worse with heat waves. They just keep coming, don't they? And, you know, we can't sort of hang about and wait for the system. And £40 million on the air conditioning, I think there's a cheaper solution out there. But I need to talk to the consulting engineers, and we need to get on with it, because if we hang about and wait until we got the money, we're going to lose a lot of cardiac work, and it doesn't take much to lose £40 million.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Jeffrey?
Thanks, Chair. Good report. Thanks, Jonathan. A couple of points, if I may. First, I really encourage the engagement with the staff, and also, you know, think to develop the OD plan as well. Cultural change shouldn't be underestimated in terms of getting people to hearts and minds into the group, and part of that. We know there's some resistance. My second point is about engagement, really, with North Wales and the Isle of Man. When I was last time I was on the board of the Heart and Chest, we used to have a lot of evening engagement events in North Wales with governors and non-execs. I've not seen that happening, and that's largely driven by the governors of North Wales. And when I tell you, we used to go, and we'd have 200 people would turn out in an evening in a church hall, and because those 200 talked to, you know, at least 200 more people, and it was really good for raising the brand. The Isle of Man, I presume you still time outpatient appointments to coincide to be helpful with the flight times. But Glenda, who was then the governor from the Isle of Man, she was really positive. And I know the Isle of Man well. I used to do a lot of work in the Isle of Man. Be interested to learn how can we promote ourselves in the Isle of Man, possibly through Teams meetings or other engagement events. But I think there's more to be done.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I'm sat too far from the screen. Who's number one?
It's me, David.
Claudette. Sorry, Claudette.
It's okay, thank you, and thanks very much, Jonathan. Really comprehensive update for the site. Echo Jeffrey's point with regards to the engagement piece. We can't underestimate that, and well done, keep that going. I guess the second point for me is about CIP and transactions. And can I just check, is it still surgery for the LHC bit that's the sticking point? And is there anything that we can do to move the sort of barriers there and issues for that cohort? And then my second question is about flow and the frailty pathway, and just building on the successes that we know we've had on the Aintree site. What are the opportunities for us in terms of cross-learning, and particularly looking at how we sort of what's the potential for us looking at the frailty pathway in its totality across all our sites and the benefits of that learning. So I'll just pause there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, do you want me to take all questions or individual questions?
No, you go for it, please.
Okay, so just to touch on Jeffrey's points, Wales and Isle of Man bits, we still have partnership and commissioner meetings that kind of drive any clinical change. Manoj actually popped in my office this morning and said they're going to do a mini road trip to Wales to say how can we engage and do better on that. But I haven't heard of the governor engagement sessions, so it might be something I just pick up with you in the background, because I'm happy to restart something if it helps improve services. Where Claudette's questions in terms of PP and flow. So private patients, no, it wasn't PP and flow, surgery, CIP and flow, but echoes private patients. So where we look at the distribution of CIP delivery, unfortunately, yes, I would say it is mainly in the surgery division. Where we've seen probably the lowest transaction element is due to private patients. So we have got a plan around marketing and improving our private patient service. But what we do think actually for surgery and cardiac surgery, we might be better looking at regional service support rather than private patients, because we know that there's probably more demand in that space than there is in the private patient element. So it's about moving that dial. The other thing in surgery CIP is about a managed service kind of conversation for theatres. And we could do a early opportunity for managed services in theatres to realise it's approximately 600,000 saving, but I'm trying to link it to the capital investment, and the capital investment's more complex because of the CDEL limit. And then in terms of flow, the positive that I've got in cross-working, and I will say I've got Jen Taylor, who was the Director of Nursing at Aintree, and was part of a lot of the improvements already started there. I know Pete has done a lot more with Nikki as well, but Jen is now responsible for flow across the sites. We have 19 wards on the site footprint, 18 wards that are open. And what we'd like to do is reconfigure how we do services between LHCH and Broadgreen to allow more of a system opportunity for the Royal and Aintree. What we might see is probably a therapy-based, therapy-led ward, or invest in therapies to try and improve that pathway, but try and get the patients across sooner from the Royal and Aintree. And then we might move some smaller wards from LHCH into bigger footprints, so we're able to bring patients over sooner from the other sites as well.
Sure. That's
Thank
really
you.
helpful. Thank you.
Sue, please.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jonathan, for your presentation on that. There was a lot in there, lots of, and it was interesting you described the overall risk assessment as being very stable. To me, it feels like there are lots of emerging issues and risks. Overall, we may have the same number and the same level of complexity in terms of risks, but there are more sort of developing. My key comments, I mean, obviously finance, we're not going to delve into too much detail here, but the SIPs, I mean, we had an issue last year with the recurrent SIPs, and it's something that, you know, the auditors were a bit concerned about as well, and it's a key recommendation for us. Just without going into too much detail, I want to ensure we continue to have that focus. And I know it's Q1, and I know it's easier to say, well, okay, that's going to materialise later on in the year. But I think these early gains are really important, and real focus is really important. So just wanted to pick up on that. The loss of activity around the current sort of hot weather conditions, you know, as David Lawton's quite rightly picked up, this is going to continue, and we need to put some mitigation plans in place, and we need some assurance around, you know, what we would do to mitigate loss of activity there. Sickness seems to be an issue that I've sort of picked up. Some of this is long term. Again, it'd be sort of like quite interesting to see what the action plans are there in terms of you know, dealing with that matter, and how that might potentially impact on activity and mitigations we have in there. You also mentioned risks, that there are a large number of sort of risks which are level 10 and 11, which have been managed within the organisation. It'd be useful just and interesting to see get a bit of flavour of those, and also the volume of those. So, you know, is that increasing? So just again to get a feel for the risk profile within the organisation. Saw your comments and heard your comments in around the freedom to speak up. You know, Claudette's already sort of touched on that. It's your engagement, you know, sessions have been really useful, and I think that we must continue with that. But this is to do with the changes, the TUPE changes, I assume, and the organisational sort of changes. But it'd be good to get some assurance around the effectiveness of, you know, what's been said by staff and what we're actually doing. And I know the engagement sort of happened, but it'd be good to sort of understand a bit more about next steps and, you know, what's actually happening to appease and, you know, deal with some of the issues which have been flagged. So there was a lot. The mutual aid point, and your comment around the private patients and the shift perhaps should be to mutual aid. It'd be good to understand the governance around that and the opportunity that's there, and how quickly you know, you can sort of deal with some of that and build that activity you know, within operations. So sorry, there's a bit of a brain dump there, but I thought your presentation was extremely interesting. There's a lot going on, a lot of risks largely being, you know, very well managed and mitigated. But yeah, just like to hear a bit more about some of those issues that I've mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've got 7 questions that I need to respond on there. So I've noted
Sorry.
them, and I'll try and do them in a congruent fashion. So CIP delivery, and I think you'll hear this echoed across all of the HMB sites. What we've tried to instill is a bit more of an increased focus over, especially in July, around the increased frequency of trying to make quick decisions around financial improvement and turnaround. For each site, it'll be subtly different. Mine's called Value Financial Improvement Group. For Pete and Leanne, it will be an FRG iteration in the same way. What we have seen in month 3, and I've just had a quick scan of the numbers, we've probably seen about a 300k improvement in CIP run rate. So it is moving in the right direction. But as you've said, you can't leave everything back-ended in the year. When you look at my HMB profile, LHCH has about 50% of the CIP delivery. DTC and Broadgreen have the other 50%. DTC 8 million, Broadgreen at about 3.9 million. There are different gear changes that I need to make across those different areas. So Broadgreen is going to be fundamentally about what pay and transformation pathway can I do. DTC, it's an amalgamation of multiple different CIP schemes. I see DTC and the pathology and radiology element, probably the biggest opportunity is regulatory compliance and turning it into a business function. And I think that's where the Lord Carter visit will be really helpful in terms of us turning that dial. And for LHCH, as I mentioned in the CIP delivery element, I think the mutual aid bit, which was another one of your questions, we've already had a reach out from Blackpool around how do we support their cardiac services. But I think where we've invested time on increasing capacity for private patients, we need to turn that into the mutual aid conversation. So it's just about moving that on as quickly as possible. But I will say, differing in practice, we need to have those kind of conversations at a local level. So Mark Field, as the Divisional Director of Surgery, is already engaged with Blackpool on that. And it's about us pushing that conversation a little bit further. But the end point of that is it'll be a good system position to be in, is that we'll improve cardiac wait times, but we just need to monitor ours at the same time. So that's, I think, CIP and the mutual aid bit. Then we get to the theatre estate bit. So in terms of theatre estate, again, I've talked to the longer term. Yeah, I think for us at the moment, and David was very clear on this, and I don't disagree with him, the weather changes shouldn't be something that we haven't planned for. However, the underlying issue I have at LHCH is that theatre estate probably wasn't fit for purpose for a couple of other factors. When we look at refurbing that theatre estate, what I don't want to get into is a consequence of spending more money on refurbing when I could build it in a different way with CDEL limit conversations. But we've had theatre ventilation issues over a number of years that we've now replaced the theatre ventilation. So there is a little bit about why hasn't the humidity element been a factor for us? So I'll pick that up with David and the engineer directly afterwards. In terms of sickness absence, you've seen the increase in stress and anxiety. I think that's partly in parts because of all the changes, but it's also part in the NHS landscape overall. We have said that we need to see increased HR support, but they are in the midst at the moment of being through an organisational change, but also having a number of vacancies that we haven't been able to recruit to. So my people director is very clear that we need to get the Band 5 support, HR support teams in and get them working across those different elements so that we see those improvements. But it is a kind of step change at the moment about capacity versus the ability to deep dive. We then move to question 4 around risk. So in terms of the risk profile, we have 42 risks at a 10 and 11. There is a distribution of those risks. Where I talk about at the beginning of the meeting about 3 different systems and 3 different approaches, and management of those. We've highlighted as a risk because we haven't got to a point where we're standardizing those risks at the moment. So although I see an increase in the glut of the 42 10 and 11s, which is about 15% of our overall HMB, we expected to see it go up before it goes down. And what I need to agree in some service lines, and I'll use pharmacy, for example, I hold all the pharmacy services for the group where there might be a statutory responsibility, but the future point is how is it devolved to site and how does the risk flow in the right way? So you will see on the corporate risk register, as well as in my risk register, a pharmacy risk and a medicines management risk that we need to draw a conclusion to both in that way. So I have no concerns because I think it's being managed in the right way, but we do have focused attention and a specific risk report in our HMB that looks across the 3 different risk registers. Then on freedom to speak up. In terms of freedom to speak up, we have 2 freedom to speak up guardians. We are looking at the key thematic themes associated with it, and we're trying to do the engagement process. So in every team brief, I kind of echo an engagement kind of piece and also echo you've got a freedom to speak up guardian. So it's kind of the 2-way of how do we listen to both themes in the same way. But in part of Lee of Claudette's question, I am looking at a development plan for HLT in divisions, and then how does it turn into care group capability and those elements as well. So hopefully all those 3 things will flow together. Right, I'm still going, I think. I think that's org change and development, and I think I picked up mutual aid already. So I think I've answered the 7 questions. Please tell me if I missed one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want, on a positive, a real positive, is the AFT, the approved advanced foundation trust status. I think that's a real opportunity for the trust. So that's very good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Beth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of the theatre discussion, I just wanted to raise something that I learned yesterday, that this might have to be looked at not just at site but also group, because what I was told was we need to replace air handling units, which may impact between 10 and 14 next year of our theatres. So again, what is site but also what is group? We might have to explore the mitigations for having to do that. What are the options, etc. So I am proposing that we take that into SMB, but I'm just saying that this might be a little bit wider than a site issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I wonder if for board next week we can come back at the right part of the agenda, Daniel, that's the meeting, public or private, about this increase in sickness absence and the question of stress at work. Look, in the past 6 days, I've been at Archest, Broad Green, Liverpool Women's, Crown Street, Royal, and here, so this is just that too anecdotal to generalise. Every place I've been to, and it's members of support staff usually, I'll say, oh, where's such and such? And yeah, off sick. Okay, well, bit work related. So the two things that I'm getting more are, one, people who we rely on in our corporate and support service structure, anecdotally, more people going off sick with stress. And secondly, more people saying, I say to them, how's it going, where are you up to? Well, I'm waiting to apply for my own job. Now, the question that comes out of all of this for me is these target operating models we've been talking about for a long time. I don't know, but it just feels that the uncertainty and the lack of closure on all of that is becoming an increasing issue. And I wonder if, well, and answer the question, either it is or it isn't, in a view, because my anecdote is unreliable in that sense. But also, when through all these corporate services, the operating model is going to be settled, when will everybody know where they stand? Because this has just been going on forever. Can we consider that at board next week?
Yeah, we can consider that, and I'll speak with Tim and Heather, who are leading on that side, to provide an update.
Because I can't remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but my expectation was this should have been, when we set out on this would have been settled ages.
We'll bring an update on where we're up to in the current position of each particular area.
Thank you, Rob.
Yes, it's just to note, David, I think you are spot on with that, and it was a theme that came out of yesterday's staff brief. So there's about 450 folks online at any time yesterday. It was probably one of the main bits of angst that folks seem to have. So I think that's right. I'm sure the guys will give an update. There is whilst the plans might have been agreed and approved, they've now got going through with the unions and the consultations and all of that stuff. So I think that's a bit of part of the delay, but I'm sure Tim and Heather will update.
Okay. Let's stop take. Thanks, Rob. It's very helpful. Let's stop take on that next week. Okay, well done, Jonathan. All good. And going back to Jeffrey's first point about the North Wales trip in particular, the governor from North Wales, my favourite governor at the Heart and Chest Trustee, talked to me about how the trust used to go out and meet with governors and potential patients and all of that. So we should consider all those things. I'll do my best to make myself available for the Jolly Boys bus trip to Barlow Lake. All these things in the past lasted a week, apparently. Anyway, yeah. Cool. Right. David, so did you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I'll take the Isle of Man. Have we got any branding there? Liverpool Heart and Chest in a clinic? Question. I need to talk to you, Jonathan, because I've done that.
Yeah, we have a partnership meeting with the Isle of Man, and we do a lot of services
not a partnership meeting. I'm talking about in the outpatients in the Isle of Man. Have we got some branding? I'll talk about it when we meet. Okay.
Thank you. Next, Aintree, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper's there. I'm just going to run through the key risks. That's okay. So currently, you will see there's 18 risks sitting greater than 12, which are on the risk register. The key one I want to highlight first is the risk that's now sitting at 13, which has come up this month, which is the sustainability of the Cheshire and Mersey element of the maxillofacial unit. And that links to 3 other risks that have been on our risk register for some time around MFU, which is around potential of single operating for flaps, the health and wellbeing of the consultant staff, and the specific issue at Leighton. What's really driving that is an increase over the years in demand, particularly around the oncology aspects of MFU, and our high reliance therefore on extra activity, both in terms of pressure on the consultants, but also the premium spend and WLI spend to maintain the targets within that care group. The risk has gone up really because one of our consultants in the oncology side, who also did a lot of extra work, is taking sabbatical back to Ireland. So that's what's caused the increase to 13. And the initial mitigation for that is we've now gone out for a substantive post to cover that period of sabbatical. And on back of that, the longer term solution, which is what I've mentioned before, is a business case that we have now completed, which shows us if we go out for further substantive staff, we will be able to meet the national standards we need to do and do that sustainably, but also then bring down the premium spend as well. So it's a win-win there for us. And Jonathan's alluded to the speed of financial decision making that we need to be doing, and so that's going to go through the Aintree version of that this week and hopefully be signed off. And I'm working with Rob because we're talking to commissioners about trying to right size that, because that ultimately is the issue there. So the risk is that's our highest risk. but we do have plans both short-term and long-term to mitigate that. The second risk I just want to talk about is the diagnostic risk in endoscopy, so the DMO1 standard. This, of course, also links to our long-standing cardiology risk in diagnostic standards. The endoscopy has progressed, has emerged over the last 6 weeks, really, where we now have a number of patients waiting for endoscopy longer than the 6-week standard. The plan for that is we are utilising mutual aid through the Halton hub with a clear plan with trajectories to bring that back down. In terms of the cardiology, we now have approved you'll recall my previous discussions on this, and we're now back in demand capacity match, but we've got a backlog. So we now have approved some insourcing to reduce that backlog. So that it will resolve that risk hopefully within the next 6 to 8 weeks. So those are the 2 risks that have really come up over the last month. Just going then through the other risks in sort of group order, if that's okay. Firstly, if I just talk through the financial risks, 2 risks of 12 in terms of finances on the Aintree risk register, 1 around expenditure, 1 around CIP. The overall position for Aintree at the end of month 2 is that we are 2.99 million behind plan, which is a deterioration of 0.9 million in month. The key issues there are pay pressure and non-delivered CIP, which I will come back to. Just to provide assurance, at the end of month 1, colleagues will remember we were slightly behind on income, but we've now caught that up. Our weighted activity rates are now up to 101%, and we are at 0.5 million ahead of our plan in terms of income. So, as expected, income has recovered. Expenditure, we were behind on pay by 0.8 million in month 2. Largely that was on undelivered CIP, but also that premium pay element I've been alluding to around MFU is a good example of it. And we're dealing that through the new processes that the AFDs have put in place. We also had a busy month in terms of urgent care, and we did have to temporarily open some extra capacities just to manage that. That has now all been closed, but that played out in month 2 in terms of expenditure. If I just come to CIP, we delivered 1.1 million of efficiency in Aintree in month 2. 0.7 million of that was budgetary CIP, and 0.4 million was run rate related efficiency. That's against a target of 1.76. So overall, year to date, we delivered 2 million efficiency versus 3.5 million. So that's a key risk for us, as I've alluded to. When you look at our tracker and look at our schemes, the key scheme that is behind and it's delivering and is the cause of that under delivery is the private patient scheme. Colleagues will remember the plan was for us to put a Vanguard theatre on site so that we could increase our theatre capacity. That has unfortunately been stalled because of fire regulations, and we're still waiting to get approval for it. At this point, I've now really decided that we need to come up with a plan B. So we now do have a different plan that probably will take out that Vanguard theatre, and we will probably not go down that route now. We do have some fallow theatres really due to consultant or anaesthetic absence, and so we are going to amalgamate that up and then utilise theatre B10 for our private patients so that we can get on and start doing that work. And having worked with James Thompson on it, we have now a plan that hopefully that will recover where we are. We've still got a bit of income deficiency to recover before we get on to CIP, but as we see it at the moment, we think we can still recover that position in year. As you will see next month, there is another emerging risk around our CIP, which is around length of stay and closure of further beds. This doesn't manifest in month 2, but you will see this in month 3, in that we have not been able to close the beds that we were supposed to close in June. So that will be a risk you will see next month. In terms of what are we doing around CIP, well, I've already sort of talked about the mitigations for the private patient scheme. But we also have other schemes we're trying to work up. Currently, we're working on an orthopaedic clinic service line review, which we saw a transformation board on Tuesday this week. There's potential savings of between 2.3 and 5 million in that, around 9 separate streams of work within orthopaedics. We're working on revs to CAP. We've also got a community bid in around no criteria to reside, which we're waiting to hear the outcome of, which will help cover off some of that length of stay issues I've just talked about. And obviously, as I've mentioned already, that sort of enhanced grip and control, if you like, around run rate, and that run rate challenge that we need to achieve of reducing our spend, and we're hoping that that will deliver on that. So there is mitigations in play, but financially the CIP is the biggest risk at Aintree. In terms of other risks, from an elective point of view, we have now reduced the RTT risk in elective, largely because performance is stable. However, there is an emerging theme in vascular around RTT performance on long waits, which Beth will know. This is largely due to increased referrals that happened 6 months or so ago due to some system pressures which are playing through the system. We now have a plan. We've always had a plan. We've got a plan to deal with that through WLIs, and I know that Beth is helping me with conversations with CPMG around how that is funded, etc. Because some of that's out of our control, but that's our biggest risk in in elective weights at this moment in time. DMO one I've already covered off. The diagnostic risk. You will see on the IPR a drop in the FDS on the IPR, which looks a significant drop. We've had a good look at that in HMB. That largely relates to the max fax risk I've just been describing, and so the mitigations for that are as already discussed. And then finally, just to take you through the urgent emergency care position, there's 2 risks on the risk register on that, as you know. Firstly, the say ambulance handover and the improvements in corridor care are largely being maintained, and you can see that on the IPR. And Aintree's handover performance now is well under trajectory and is moving up the sort of benchmarking in Cheshire and Mersey. Our key pressures are in the 4R standards, both on admitted and non-admitted performance, and largely our mitigations of that are around improving the non-admitted performance. That will improve our overall performance, and that is again is a key plan around our same-day urgent care unit. The 12R also remains 12 hours in ED remains a pressure for us, and that's largely around working with our system partners and some of that frailty work that Claudette was mentioning as well, to try and drive down that length of stay, because we know that flow and no criteria reside are absolutely linked to the 12-hour standards. You will see on the IPR that the no criteria to reside numbers in Aintree are coming down. You can see that's probably statistically significant now, which is pleasing, but that is coming from a high level. So there's still plenty of work to do, as we all know. The other big risk and you can see it on the IPR on the UEC is the 15-minute triage standard, which I'll cover off in a second when I come to that paper, if that's okay, Chair. Yep. And then finally, these 4 questions, I just want to talk about quality. You can see in the IPR that through our quality performance ward review process, that our quality standards are being maintained, and those improvements we're seeing continue, which is very pleasing. We have now reduced the infection prevention control risk, because the number of infections that we are seeing at Aintree site are now at a lowest level for some time, and we're also in trajectory for the national standard around the MRSA, etc., and C. diff, etc. So we brought that list down. That's not saying we're not still concentrating on it, but it's not. I don't think it's sitting at 12 currently. And then finally, just to say, it's really pleasing to see from a quality perspective, we've now got 5 platinum wards at Aintree, part of the LQA, so that's really good. The rest of the wards are also moving up. We've only got 3 now at bronze, and there's a whole plan wrapped around those 3 wards to keep moving them through as well. So from an LQA perspective, we're making progress as well. But I'll pause there for questions, and then.
Sorry, Peter, do you want to do the?
Shall I do the 15-minute as well? Then
yeah, do
take questions. It's probably
easiest,
isn't it? So this was requested last time. Really, just to summarize the background to that. It's quite clear on the IPR. If you look at it, there was a deterioration in performance around July 25, and that follows on a period of really stable performance for a couple of years following improvement. So that was disappointing. So we've looked at that particular period, see what's changed, what's happening, and what the causes are. first thing to say, it is not about increased attendances. So the attendances levels have been fairly stable. The other thing to say is that most people are still being triaged in 15 minutes when you look at the table, and the average performance is generally under 15 minutes. And what's interesting is that the period of deterioration in triage basically mirrors a period of improvement in 60 minutes of treatment. So whilst we're not getting people triaged as quickly, we are getting people treated more quickly at 60 minutes. So there's something specific around the triage. When we've looked at it, it's multifactorial. The two key issues for me is resilience in the staffing around 15-minute triage. Aintree is notorious for surges of attendances, and our inability to flex around those surges, I think, is a key driver. Also, we've put in almost competing processes for the nursing team down in ED around Sudoku triage, and also colleagues remember that I put a care navigator in pre-triage to try and ensure that people who don't need to enter the ED can be moved around to the same-day urgent care unit for their treatment. So there's competing processes that we probably need to join up in a more coordinated fashion. There's some underlying things behind that. So there's been an increase in vacancy numbers, and that's been particularly in the band 6s and 7s who do most of this triage. So then that links to the risk you see on my risk register. But recruitment in that is well underway, and we're making progress. And then laterally, with the last couple of drops, last couple of points in the IPR is related to band 6, band 7 sickness, actually. And again, we put in supportive processes around that to improve it. There's a couple of issues around estates, around availability of treatment rooms, and some pathway remodelling we need to do around the ambulatory care aspect of ED, and we're doing some time and motion studies to improve that. So in terms of that's the causes and some of the mitigations, but overall the short-term mitigation is that we're getting some senior nursing leadership onto the triage process when we get surges. So that is the short-term solution, and we can see some marginal improvement. I'll give you some figures in the paper there over the last 3 weeks. You'll see some improvements back to about mid-70s. So still not where we want to be, but that's having an impact. That's not long. That won't be sustainable long term. So the long-term plan is that sickness review, continuing to recruit into the vacancies, which is well underway, and then get the change we need around that coordination of the competing processes. We have put in now 4 early huddles to look at it. We look at it weekly now in the ED meeting, daily in the ED meeting, and we're looking at it weekly from an HLT senior leadership team performance to put some pace on the improvement, and the trajectories we have set is that by the end of August we will be back at the 85%. So I'll pause there and take any questions on that.
Thank you. Points for Peter, please. Start with Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for the presentation on that dichotomy between the 60 minutes treatment and the 15-minute triage, which seemed to me a bit hard at the time. Thank you for that. It's really helpful. The first question relates to the workforce planning. Have we got that right? Looking at the number of those risks, particularly around surgery in the ED, the stress on some of the consultants and the weekend working, that clearly can't be right. That long term, not sustainable. So have we got the workforce model right for the right number of people in those areas? I've got a second question about length of stay in a moment. I'll let you come back to that one afterwards.
So in terms of the workforce modelling, Jeffrey, I think that is driving some of our expenditure, and it is driving that health and wellbeing issue. I think so. If you look at Max Factor is a really good example of where it is a unit that has just grown and grown, and we've been increasingly relying on premium spend to deal with it. So the business case really deals with that. There's another improvement and business case that I'm bringing through particularly around acute medicine, because it's a very similar issue there, Jeffrey, where we don't have enough acute physicians. We rely on specialist physicians backfilling into that, and we would be much better. And there's some premium spend around it as well. So if we convert that premium spend into substantive spend and with the right doctors, then we will have a much better flow, as I think you're alluding to in the ED. So that's the next cab off the rank, really, in terms of what we're doing around the bit that Jonathan described as urgency around financial decision making, because there's a financial saving in that as well, as well as a. And I completely agree, David, and we discussed it on Tuesday. So
Yeah,
that is immediately to the permanent post. So
as long as I'm here, we need a new system. You come and see me, right? And I'll tell you, without a business case, get on with it according to the specialty. Because I know what you do is you employ the people, then you get the work.
Yeah.
And you get the work at basic pay rates, not paying waiting list initiatives.
No, I agree. That's
There's
great.
too much of a culture in this organisation of waiting list initiatives. Yeah.
No, and it's really helpful, David, in that.
And I'm going for the same for nursing, everything.
Yeah.
We're just forking out money.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I
And
agree.
it goes back to the point that Jeffrey makes about workforce. Have you got the workforce right? Things happen, but you've got to be quick on your feet to react to it to save the money. That's my rant finished.
Noted. Thank you. Daniel, did you want on this point? I'll go back to Jeffrey.
Well, yeah,
That's a system that's been put in place.
yeah. I suppose given the issues that David raised and covered in Pete, but it was also covered partly in Jonathan's, and I think there's some risks within Leanne. I do wonder whether there's a little bit of work we need to just step back and look at where we've got specialist services and where there is workforce fragility, either based on a single point of failure.
I know because the very first time I met with the chief exec at Arrow Park, right? And we start talking about fragile services. She's got a long list.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to look at this on a wider patch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you've got spare capacity, you can always get it. I mean, in cardiac, I used to do a great wheeze with Scotland and Wales. I was getting work from Wales and you're right next door.
Yeah. So I suppose it's looking at those areas and actually saying, what do we need to do to get ahead of that game?
Yeah.
And it's more of that, about bringing those areas together from across the
I think
three.
the other thing, when you're looking particularly at consultants, you need a lot of local knowledge across Cheshire, Merseyside, and probably into Lancashire. What are the fragile specialties? And that aids you to make a decision.
Yeah. And that work's being done via the Cheshire Mersey Provider Collaborative, which
The fragile services will not be particularly in this organisation.
no, it'll be in others.
It be in others, and the questions that I keep asking, there doesn't seem to be the knowledge in this organisation of what's happening in Warrington, da-di-da-di-da.
Okay. Can I go back to Jeffrey, or do you want to finish on this one?
Just one brief.
Yes,
I completely agree with you. But we did, so ENT is a really good example.
It's always been like that.
Last year we were exactly here. What we did is we raised it, and as a Cheshire and Mersey, we've made some changes to the way it flows. And so ENT is not really a fragile service, so completely agree. So we can do it.
There'll be another one, right?
No, well,
That's good. Back to Jeffrey. please.
Thanks, Chair. It relates to the point I made yesterday, really, at the Finance Committee about the opportunity for vertical integration with primary care, particularly for Sefton, which is a pioneer area on neighbourhood working, and the opportunity, Peter, to be strengthening those relationships with primary care to get ahead of those patients who otherwise will be sent in to A&E and actually can be dealt with in the community. But actually, there isn't that vertical conversation at times. And I think the neighbourhood model is that opportunity to reduce length of stay and reduce delayed discharge and reduce admissions, especially things like video links to care homes where you can actually do diagnosis ahead and rather than being admitted by ambulance, better the patient all the way around. When I was at St Helens, we did that high definition video consultation with consultants preventing admissions of patients who had UTIs, whatever it was, actually dealt with in the home much better, much more comfortably. So those opportunities really, Peter.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
just briefly, right, I completely agree, Jeffrey, and linking with primary care is something we've got to do better, and I think David has even spotted that since he's arrived as well, which is really helpful. I am linked in with, we think from an entry, I've got 3 partners, Liverpool, Sefton and Knowsley, so I've got to get it right everywhere, which I do my best to do. And each of those 3 areas are working on that neighbourhood plan. So, but we really need the GPs in it, I completely agree. And then just to say that in terms of that video conferencing thing, Leanne should probably be too humble to say it, but yeah, is probably our expert in that, because the Airedale did a fantastic job around that type of stuff, and we're well known countrywide for that. So we can possibly pick on Leanne's expertise in there to push that further forward, Jeffrey, but I completely agree with you.
Thanks,
Thank
David. David, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I mean, the point that you make is a good one. And I've got a question. Do we know by nursing home in the area admissions? And also, it's not just that, it's day of the week of admissions, because from my past experience, there's a tendency that the admissions go up at weekends when they're avoiding paying premium time.
Yeah.
And I have in a past life, you'd find this surprising, picked up the phone to the owner of a nursing home and given them a good going over about, you know, you've been taking the money, but you've now got a problem and you're passing it to me.
Thank you. Claudette next, please.
Thanks, Chair, and just building on Jeffrey's point, I guess my specific question, Pete, is that thanks very much for the overview, really, really comprehensive. Great to see the no criteria to reside numbers falling, but it all links back to Jeffrey's point in terms of the out of hospital provision and how we're maximising that. And I said it yesterday in the meeting, we need to get the brilliance basics right. And that brilliance basic is about supporting people to stay well in their own homes. We have a role to play in that, and it's back to those connections and that vertical integration that Jeffrey was talking about. And I think it'll be great if we can get into that space quite quickly to have those discussions. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, David Knight.
Yeah, I've got a team of, I'm sending a team of people back to Walsall, Wolverhampton to see how it's done and create 600 beds in the community. So taking on the point that you make, and I've also got a meeting with the chief exec of Merseycare, is it? Yeah. And I'll be saying I want to take over the district nurses.
There's David, if I may, there's another factor to this, and I'm sure Peaceful Pete Turkington will recognise this. We do need to have that conversation with our social care partners, because actually...
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. I mean, in my previous life, I had a control centre with social services, all the district nurses and the capacity teams within the hospital. And I think I spent about £500,000 on giving them a nice big office, but getting them all together is absolutely essential. And social services is a big key to it. So that is what, when they go and see what's going on in the West Midlands, they'll see exactly that. And it comes from having the whole team together and getting them to work as a team. Because, you know, I've always said the worst problem with the NHS is actually social services, because it should never be, you know, it should be funded from general taxation, not local government. And that's been a flaw in the system for years. But where we're at, that's not going to change. And the only way you can overcome it is at the working level to get them to work together as if it's seamless. So I'll take your point totally there, Claudette.
Yeah, just to say, and with all of that, and the advantage of working with social services is, and our social worker colleagues they think completely differently, and the way they think is
many years ago, all hospitals had a dedicated head of social services, and I think it was on the reorganisation of whenever it was, I can't remember. That all changed, and we had a really good close relationship. And the person who was head of social services working for you'd have thought they worked for the NHS. So it really did. You'll remember that.
Yeah.
Don't make me feel old.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sue, please.
Okay, thank you, David. Pete, you've described the financial risk as the biggest risk that you have. And we're 3 million behind where we need to be at the end of month 2, largely because of the SIP and the private element of the work, the private patient work that we're expecting to do. So a couple of questions around the SIP. You say we're going to make that up later on in the year. What are the timescales to that? And you spoke about Plan B on the private patients and the other theatre capacity. How quickly are you going to sort of get that up and running and, you know, moving that forward? The recurrent element of the SIP, could you just give us some assurance around how that's building? And because obviously That's really key to what we're doing. I wanted to raise the point about appraisals just across the group, touching on this point about staff being off with stress and anxiety and not being sure about how the TOMS system is going to work for them. I think that is an opportunity. The appraisals is an opportunity to talk to people and give them some assurance around, what their future looks like and what their role is within that. So just wanted to sort of understand a bit more about those two particular points. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. So in terms of this SIP, you're right. At the end of month 2, the scheme that was biggest was the key element off track was the private patient scheme. That's because of the Vanguard theatre issue I've described. So the new plan is not even plan B, no plan, which is to do the theatre activity actually within our theatre footprint, and that's because we've picked up all the fallow lists and sort of amalgamated them into one theatre for 3 days. So that plan is like it started. So the recovery will be in Q2. Well, that's where it'll start. However, there is, in terms of this SIP, as I've said, there is a income deficit to recover as well. So we said we were going to do some private patients, and we haven't done enough to get the income we said we were going to get. So there's an income recovery a bit as well before we can get into the CIP. So we'll start to see that recovery towards the end of Q2, I think, in terms of the CIP. But we're working with James Thompson and from a commercial aspect on that. And it's a bit of a moving feast at the minute. So, I mean, at the minute, it's recovered as quickly as possible is the plan, but we've got to be realistic in terms of implementing it and then recovering where we are behind as well. The recurrent element is largely where it was last year at Aintree in terms of proportions. There is a non-recurrent element to it, but then of course there always was to our plan anyway because the stretch was non-recurrent. But yeah, we absolutely have those conversations every week at FRG about the importance of recurrent SIP. And then the appraisals, absolutely. I mean, I think I raised this at HMB. I mean, in terms of the IPR, there's 2 most concerning data points in our IPR. One was the FDS drop, and the appraisal drop. But the appraisal pattern really worried me because it almost looks like targets going up, performance going down. So it was the scissors of doom, really. So really key conversations and divisions are now bringing back through our people and OD group plans for how we are addressing that, and particularly around which staff groups is it that we are not getting to, and why, and what can we do differently to get to those staff groups? Because I completely agree with you that that's a really important time. We're going back to, I think, David's point initially about staff morale and staff sickness. That's the time to address it, isn't it? So those were the 2 key bits of the IPR I was most concerned about. So I agree with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Right. I just want to make sure we put on the record points that we haven't mentioned from the IPR. One is the sustaining of the remarkable improvement in ambulance handover times. It's now consistently below standard day. We have a long history of real challenges on this side with ambulance handovers. So that's excellent at 24 minutes. And also, when we made reference to it, this dramatic decline in the faster diagnosis cancer 28. Yeah, the 20 opposite difference. Yeah. You know, but that's serious regulations.
I totally agree, David, and that was the flavour of the conversation at HMB. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've seen a graph as worried as that for one. So
it must be a typo at first, but
no. Right, I hope that way it is, but it links to Max Facts thing. So
it's that was it. That's
planning.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sue, sorry, do you want to come back or is just your hand? No, okay, right. Let's move on. The Royal and Liverpool Women's. Leanne, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just key points for the committee, excuse me. Since the last committee, we have completed a comprehensive review of our risk register. just in reflection of the fact that we had 40 risks and a number of those were duplicated and they weren't reflective of the controls that we've had in place. So we've completed a big review with the divisional leadership teams and the HLT. And the outcome of that, which is now concluded, is that we have now reduced the risks that are over 12 from 40 down to 20. 12 of those are unchanged risks with 8 new ones, and they're the result of consolidated risks that were duplicating work and had the same controls, and those that were updated to reflect the score and the controls that we have in place within the divisions. I have summarised the reassessment output in the paper, so I won't go into each of the elements across the 4 domains, but the biggest one that has seen the biggest improvement is through quality and safety, with a particular focus in relation to urgent and emergency care and consolidating the risks and all of the controls and the work that we're doing linking into that one domain, as well as the continual risks we've got within infection prevention and the risks at the Liverpool Women's as a result of the site configuration that this committee will be well versed on. Just a couple of things then to pull out from quality and safety that's linked to our IPR report. We have had one MRSA bacteremia this month. It is in the critical care unit at the Royal and was unavoidable. The patient presented with MRSA and was under active resus. We obviously are doing a full patient safety incident as a result of that piece of work for any learning. And the second thing, just timely, given the maternity triage document that landed yesterday afternoon with us as part of some national work around maternity triage scores, the times for 15 minutes for the Liverpool Women's are at 82%, which is the lowest it has been for some time. I know we'll hear later from the Director of Midwifery on the PQOM report. The target is obviously 85%, and that is linked to some of the demand increases that we've seen and the acuity and the admissions through our units. We do have a recovery plan in place, which is expected to improve that throughout August and September, but it will link to the document that I've just referenced that's come out yesterday, and that will be going to board within 3 months of the publication is the ask in relation to a gap analysis associated with maternity triage. So we will keep this group updated to that effect. Just in terms of people, I probably don't want to reiterate everything we've discussed in relation to sickness, but the Royal and Liverpool Women's are showing similar pictures compared to the other sites. We do have a particular challenge in the Liverpool Women's in some areas, particularly theatres, where our sickness levels are at 10%. I do want to pick up some of the work that we are doing just in relation to, I think, Sue, your question, and Claudette, some of your questions earlier. There is a Well for Work piece of work as part of our transformation programme that Heather, our Chief People Officer, is leading on for the group that specifically focuses on our sickness absence policies, as well as relaunching early intervention support structures for staff, particularly focused around mental health, stress and anxiety. So hopefully that will support some of the discussions that we've talked to earlier on in the meeting. From an operational perspective, Pete's already referenced diagnostics. It's the similar position for the Royal. We have diagnostic performance at 20%, more than 6 weeks, just under, and that should be 5%, as this committee will be aware. The risk is related to endoscopy and cystoscopy, and that is due to severe workforce shortages in those specialties, particularly in gastroenterology. We've got 6 consultant vacancies in that area, which equates to about 600 patients short per month, which is why we're deteriorating rapidly. We have met the divisions. I've gone through that with them directly with the head hospital leadership team. We have developed a remedial action plan for that specialty. Key elements of that include substantive recruitment to clinical fellows to replace our consultant gaps, and we have got appointments made to half of those 3 appointments, and they commence post in October, and we're working to recruit to the remainder. We've also sought some additional internal and external capacity to recover that position, and that starts from the 20th of July. And we're also doing the productivity work, making sure we're maximising our call lists that we are currently running. We have seen the early shoots of recovery for cystoscopy just this last week. It has improved by 28%, and we've halved our waiting list backlog. So we will keep going with cystoscopy, and our work around endoscopy is going to take a little bit more time given the size of the backlog that we've got in there, but we will keep this group updated. via this committee. Just in terms of the long waits for elective, at the time of writing the report, we do have significant risk in relation to 52 weeks, particularly at the Liverpool Women's, with 247 patients over 52 weeks. Again, the improvement work we have been doing with Beth's team has seen that reduce significantly, and we're now down at 155 patients. So we will keep working on that. We do have a risk in relation to endometriosis services, which for those of you that are up to speed with the latest news, you'll know that's a national challenge. We are recruiting to those vacancies. And apologies, there is an error in the report. It does say the 3rd of July, which you'd expect me to confirm whether or not we've had interviews and if we've appointed. We did get rescheduled to tomorrow, so I'll keep you updated as to the outcome of those appointments. I think UEC has been well covered throughout the report. Just want to bring some elements of that to life a little bit. We have done an analysis of our acuity, and our P2 and our P3 acuity, so the urgent, very urgent patients that are presenting into our emergency departments, has increased significantly over time, which I've included in the report, and that is reflected in our bed base and then causes further pressures for our community and local authority services, with 16% of our bed stock, which is about 100 patients that don't meet the criteria to reside with us at the Royal. We do have a system-wide urgent emergency care programme in place. Pete's obviously very close to that through the length of stay workers, as are myself and Jonathan, and you'll be pleased to know I have made the connections already with Airedale, Pete. So the Merseycare have now got the connection with the lead at the digital care hub at Airedale Hospital, who provides extensive digital remote care and extensive virtual ward offers. So they are meeting, and I'm going to join them, but you are welcome to join us after they return from annual leave in the next 2 weeks. An emerging risk just in operations, I think it would be remiss if I don't mention it, in relation to Vasta Diagnostic Standard, particularly in breast. That will be a risk score of 12 next month when we meet again. And again, that is linked to maternity leave, sickness, compounding vacancies we've got in that area. We are developing a remedial action plan and working very closely with Beth's team. And as part of the work that I'll come on to shortly around the emergency approach to how we're managing financial recovery, we've got some workforce strategy alternatives to exit out of some of our premium costs and insourcing arrangements there. Last, Rob, but certainly not least in relation to finance, saving the best for last. Liverpool Women's have got a balanced position at month 2, which is a positive thing, but just within that, we do have a shortfall on CIP of 600k, which is linked to some of the corporate TOM work and the more recently applied 2% efficiency challenge, which we're just working up plans for. We have mitigated that in the first 2 months with underspends elsewhere in a favourable income position, but obviously we're focusing our efforts on the CIP recovery at the Women's. At the Royal, a little bit of a worse position in terms of the adverse variance, 5.3 million this month, year to date. That's split broadly into 2 halves, a game of 2 halves, quite topical for us at the current time. Half of that is related to areas where we've got increases in activity within our income plan, increases in activity required to meet our RTT trajectories with our commissioners, and some business cases that we'd agreed previously in previous years that we're just working through a funding mechanism for, and obviously the impact of industrial action of 500,000 wrapped up in that position as well. The other half of that is the shortfall in CIP delivery. Main culprits of that are private patients, which Pete's already covered, the length of stay work, given some of the pressures we've got in our urgent and emergency care, albeit we have managed to make some inroads into that, and some delays in the deployment in our digital solutions for AVT. It's just going a little bit slower than what our plan anticipated, but we are piloting that as we speak. Key actions for recovery for finance, the grip and control mechanisms continue, and our spend isn't deteriorating, but it's stubborn. But we are adopting some of those principles at the Liverpool Women's, and they've been really receptive to that, so that's really positive. And as the committee will be aware, the response to managing the financial position as if it were a business continuity incident in line with EPRR principles has commenced. We've had 2 meetings at both the sites. They meet twice a week. They are accelerating the delivery of particularly around, I was going to say business cases, but I can see David's eyes glaring at me. So they're not business cases. They are 2-page proposals. If you can get it in 1 page, even better. They are proposals around good ideas that are all almost like a Dragon's Den kind of pitch, just with friendlier dragons, and that's just accelerating decisions at the HLT level. And so far we've got 6 proposals that we've considered that give us a positive position in circa about £1 million that is just going to close down some of that gap. So early indications are that's doing what it needs to do. But more on that to come, and we'll report formally into FRG at group level in terms of financial recovery. We are doing some work with Rob and the finance team to review the budgets, and we are redesigning the private patient work with the divisional clinical teams just to mitigate and claw some of that delay back. And we do have a workforce strategy piece of work to commence over the next 6 weeks, with a specialty by specialty review of our workforce models, including skill mixes, alternative models, and including fragile services where we've got them across our groups. I think I'll stop there. Happy to ask any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Well done. Point questions for Leanne, please. Come to David here first, and then back to you, Claudette.
Okay, I wasn't glaring at you, Leanne, honest. I think really the point you make about clinical fellows and what you're doing there, I think we need to actually, and I look to Andy to do this as well, and we need to strengthen the relationship with the university. I mean, I accept I'm not up to speed with where we're at with it, but from where I sit at present, I don't think we've maximised on clinical fellows. And here's a challenge for you all. Within 12 months, we employ no locum doctors at all. Now, you've got to do your manpower planning. Now, how are you going to do that with clinical fellows? And I'm really interested at meeting with the university because, you know, I've from bitter experience, it's how good your academic programme is determines the quality of the people that you can recruit. And if you get the right people, they'll do the work for you. And the loyalty you get from them is just unbelievable. So 12 months, yeah, no locum doctors at all. And the same obviously goes waiting list initiatives. You can get rid of all of that as well.
Well,
Peter, challenge accepted. But just to give you some assurance that we've just at Aintree put in a clinical fellow rotation programme, actually, which we approved a couple of months ago. So yeah, we're trying to build those clinical fellows up, and then there's an educational fellows. With
okay, I may have said it in too much code.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I need some assurance around where the university is in this.
Yeah.
Because I've had people from outside Merseyside whispering in my ear about it's not very good.
Yes, but that'll be the education.
I'm talking about the university,
yeah.
Right? So I need to understand. I may be completely wrong, but I've had people in London whispering in my ear about the relationship, right?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Very helpful. Got Sue then Claudette, please.
Thank you, David. Just a couple of points. Firstly, just around the emus, you've reported that there's been deterioration there. We've had no never events, which is good to hear. But can you just give us some assurances that we haven't had any near misses? So there's that comment there. You've undertaken a review of the risks and the consolidation of the risks, and some have been de-escalated. I think it'd just be good to get some assurance, as we are the Assurance and Risk Committee, that that process has been undertaken with the appropriate governance, and we've not de-escalated anything we shouldn't have de-escalated, just to get some assurance around that. Wanted to pick up on the SIP issue, which we obviously have across the board. A couple of specific points around that is the VR schemes. Haven't heard much about that today, but just wanted to understand that that's in place and how that's feeding into our SIP programs, and also the controls that we have around premium payments, linking into David Lawton's point around locums. You know, just are we really managing that? Because that will be something we'll be challenged on in terms of premium payments to staff. I've heard quite a bit today about private patients and the impact that not moving that on as quickly as we need to is impacting on SIPs and also on the financial performance. And I just wondered whether it'd be appropriate for the board to have an update from Tom on the commercial strategy and how this private patient work across the group is, you know, moving on, and what the challenges are and how we're mitigating that, because that is so fundamental to our financial plan delivery. And just finally, I just wanted to make a comment around the friends and family test. The patient experience seems to have deteriorated a bit based on the comments on the figures in the report. I think that those were my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I think well, we need a. Sorry, Leah, I'll come back to you, but we need a more general stock take, I think, on the James Thompson work on the private patients.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, James. Yeah,
with the with Pat's visit to us for a couple of weeks with income generation and commercial activity more general. Sorry, Leanne, to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. In relation to the e-Muse, we obviously got the Director of Midwifery on the call, and so I'm sure she'll pick that up in her PQOM report, so I don't want to duplicate that. That is linked to our acuity and some staffing challenges that we've got, but I know Helith will pick that up, so I probably won't want to cover that if that's okay. It'd be good to hear from the Director of Midwifery on that. Just in terms of the Never events, we haven't had a Never event, but just in terms of this committee, we have got 2 that are under review for this current month. So in June, we'll see that in the ARC report for July that we are reviewing. I can't give you the number for the near misses, so I don't have that number to hand, but what I will, and I don't want to guess, so I will get you that number and I will let you know outside of this meeting and ensure it is included within the minutes for completeness. In terms of the risk approach, we have done that with the divisional leadership teams and the corporate governance team as part of that risk review that has gone through our hospital management board structures. A lot of that was consolidation. So there were some that weren't reflective of the controls that we did have in place, and the proportionality when we look at our scoring matrix. They weren't reflective of the risks we were seeing. We weren't seeing incidents and reports of Datix incidents was coming through associated with those risks, so it didn't feel proportionate. That was obviously done with clinical and operational teams as well as the divisions and the risk team, so it wasn't something that was unilaterally taken. So I'm confident that we've done that correctly. I think that has enabled us to do is focus in those areas of the biggest risk, and I think the divisions were getting distracted by the smaller risks. We are going to repeat that exercise with the 10s and 11s just to make sure that there's nothing that needs to escalate up or down. And as I say, we've got some new risks as well, which was important to be included in those. The CIP issue in relation to the, I don't know if Rob was going to pick that up in his sort of summary at the end. We do have recent the sort of 3rd and 4th phases now included within the bridge that I think the committee will see at some point, and Rob may touch on it later. That has been included in our plans at site level now. We're just working through how we transact those and what the best way is to reflect those at site or group level at the moment. So Rob's working with EMDs in relation to that. The private patient is a good one. I think it's James rather than Tom that's is probably the best person to James, whether he's able to present something. I'll leave that to Daniel to pick up with him directly, Sue. But we are very close in terms of working with James, and he's very present with the divisional leadership teams in just rebuilding some of those plans to mitigate that risk. Friends and family for us is primarily related to delays in access to care. Usually urgent and emergency care departments bear the brunt of that, as you'd probably imagine, as well as some of the links with our complaints and friends and family to diagnostics, which I think we've well rehearsed today as well. So hopefully that covers the questions, but I know Helith will pick up the e-Muse as well in terms of more detail around that.
Thank you. Claudette, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Leanne. Really great to see the update and the comprehensive nature of it. Just a couple of points from me. really good to see that you've reviewed the risk register in the way that you've described, and the assurance that you've just provided based on Sue's question was the one that I was going to ask. But more importantly, I guess it's no bad thing sort of doing those reviews, because it does help us to keep a good grip on those areas. So well done for doing that. You raised the issue with regards to sickness, stress and anxiety, and I just wonder what opportunities we have as an organisation to influence how the shape of the resilience hubs for each of the regions, because there is a focus and emphasis on supporting the reduction of sickness. And I just wonder whether, you know, maybe a conversation with Heather about how we contribute and influence what that looks like within our region, so it supports our staff.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Thanks, Claudette. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. On this issue of the assessment of the risk scores, I have no doubt about absolutely no doubt about the integrity and the objectivity of the process you could go through there. That's clear. But the issue for us in this committee and indeed in board is the consistency between the site groups. So we have a site-by-site discussion here. We're trying to hold on to across the whole of the group where the bigger risks sit and the action that we're taking. Are we prioritising the right things in resource deployment and workforce planning? So, and to what extent do you have cross-check peer reviews, a bit for granted, but cross-check between Peter, Jonathan, and Leanne that we hear when we see the whole thing can rely on the consistency that a 12 at the Royal is a bigger problem than a 10 at Aintree. That's and it's not a perfect science, but that's what we continually trying to seek. And your review of the risk scores, Leanne, across your sites just begs that question again. I don't know if that's something, Daniel, that we should go back to.
Yeah, so in a kind of way, we've got within each of the HLTs is supported by a quality governance lead and a corporate governance.
That's the mechanism. Yeah.
What we should be doing, and I'll take this away, is whilst I'm very conscious of the work that I know Jonathan's quality governance lead has done and within Leanne's, is are they taking it back and sharing it between the quality governance leads about that consistency check? Because as we go through, we often have discussions in the executive team about consistency, and that's not just on the sites, it's about the corporate services ones that Beth will go on to in a minute. But I'll take that back and make for the next committee, we'll talk about what's the learning from.
We get assurance on that first.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, hello, welcome. I think you're first.
I think Jeffrey's just wanted to come.
Sorry,
Jeffrey's got his hand.
Sorry, I didn't notice your hand. My apologies. Over to you.
No. The last point was a really good point. That point really about the Ockenden report, really, having a chance to go through the whole report. And there's anything in that you think the risks change or the learning needs to be adopted?
Yeah, it's a great point and very timely, Jeffrey, because we are covering that in the PQOM report, which is great to have the Director of Midwifery on this group to present that. So I have joined, I'm a nominal midwife, Jeffrey, so I've joined the regional midwife on 2 of her briefing sessions. Thank you to Helen for inviting me. Some great learning there. I think through the report, we are being asked to do a gap analysis against the recommendations, and you'll have seen Jim Mackey's 10-point plan, which we're obviously asked to implement some immediate actions. Helen, I know, is going to cover some of that in her statement. We have got some information going to board as well for this month. So a lot of learning from that, and we will do a review of our risk register. I think it's a great point, Jeffrey, but yeah, I know Helen's going to pick it up, so I don't want to steal her thunder. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks.
Thank you. Helen, big build up. You're on.
Thank you very much, Chair. So overall, from the perinatal quality oversight report, I'm giving an overall assurance rating as moderate. We've had no patient safety incident investigations, no MOS signals. Now MOS stands for, in case people don't know, are not aware, it's Maternity Outcome Signal System. No Regulation 28 notices or maternity suspensions reported during this period. Our workforce indicators remain strong, including 100% compliance with one-to-one midwifery care in established labour and supernumerary delivery suite leadership. Our key areas of escalation are induction of labour delays. This is the most notable area of concern, with delays being at 52 in May compared with 12 in April of this year. This represents 22.6% of all inductions, which is significantly higher than the performance seen over the previous 12 months. Whilst no patient harm has been identified because we've reviewed them, this does not support a great patient experience. So we are currently doing a comprehensive deep dive review to examine our capacity flow, escalation processes and bed occupancy. The risk is on the risk register and it's currently scored at a 9, and we regularly review that. We have touched on the maternity triage assessment. So our triage performance in terms of the 15 minutes triage has seen a gradual decline since November 25, more markedly since March of this year, and the decline peaked in May at 82.51%. Now, why is this, can we ask ourselves? So the 15-minute triage activity has increased by 7%. We are now seeing attendances in our maternity assessment unit of between 1,500 to 1,600 per month. Therefore, the demand has accelerated by 20% in the last 6 months. We do have a plan to recover this performance, and we should start seeing that performance come through to 85% by September. The other area I want to note is our Embrace report. So nationally, the Embrace reports for 2024 were recently published. And this identified that at Liverpool Women's, we're an outlier for extended perinatal mortality and neonatal mortality over a 3-year period. Now, when we analyse and look through this report, this position, it's significantly influenced by our role as a regional tertiary centre. So our fetal medicine centre receives complex cases, cardiac cases, and also in terms of our surgical neonatal cases. And also we accept in utero transfers from across the region and wider nationally. So when congenital abnormalities and terminations of pregnancy are included, our stillbirth rate is average at 3.42 per 1,000 births. The neonatal mortality, which is 2.73 per 1,000 live births, is 5% higher than comparable trusts. Therefore, the extended perinatal mortality at 6.15 per 1,000 births is 5% higher than comparable trusts. However, when you exclude the congenital anomalies and terminations of pregnancies, our stillbirth rate, neonatal mortality and extended perinatal mortality rates are lower. Therefore, the Embrace outlier status is primarily driven by our specialist tertiary centre and concentration of high-risk fetal, neonatal, cardiac and surgical activity, because 53% of neonatal deaths that occurred in babies whose intended place of birth was not Liverpool Women's at booking, it was elsewhere. Also, 68% of the neonatal deaths were associated with congenital anomalies. Therefore, when these anomalies are excluded, our mortality outcomes are lower than the average of comparable trusts. In terms of our neonatal capacity pressures, during May, there was one service suspension due to capacity pressures. However, they have been reviewed and no patient harm occurred. However, it does highlight ongoing system pressures within the neonatal service. If I can just go on briefly to mention the two reports, I think there is a tsunami effect happening in maternity services nationally in terms of all the work that is required. And also, we cannot underestimate how this will be received by our maternity service user population, because they will be worried and scared in reading these reports. So in terms of Ockenden, Nottingham, so our immediate actions following receiving this report have been to read and digest that report. We've met as a North West, as a regional team, and we've received very clear guidance that we are to complete a gap analysis based on that immediate actions within the report, but not to progress with any implementation of actions, as this will be the role of the National Maternity Task Force. And on Tuesday, the National Maternity Task Force were receiving both reports, one, the Ockenden from Donna Ockenden and the Amos report from Baroness Amos. In terms of our Amos reports, so we have reviewed, read, digested, reviewed the report in details. And based on the findings and urgent actions, which are the 10-point sprint plan, I can say that at Liverpool Women's, we are well positioned to demonstrate positive progress against the national direction of travel. We have already embedded key elements aligned to this 10-point action plan, including onboarding of the Perinatal Equity and Anti-Discrimination Programme, active engagement with patient experience, completion of the regional home birth review, and ongoing work to improve culture, staff engagement and learning. Our priorities will focus on embedding Martha's Rule, assuring safe and responsive 24/7 services, strengthening trauma-informed and compassionate responses following incidents, undertaking the triage audit, and maintaining a focus on equity and listening to women and families. Therefore, overall, we can provide assurance that our trajectory is aligned with national expectations, but recognising that there is a phenomenal amount of strong leadership, focus required to deliver all the national requirements. Thank you.
Yeah, Helen, first time that you presented, that's excellent. It's a really good report and very well presented. I've got one or two points I'd like to come back to, but I'll open up for others first. Okay. David.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we haven't had an opportunity to meet. We're meeting later today, but an awful lot of what you have said, I mean, I don't have any concerns about the performance of Liverpool Women's, and I can say that because I used to chair the newborn network for Birmingham, Black Country, Shropshire and Staffordshire for years, and I identified the problems at Shrewsbury and Telford probably 5 years before it hit the fan. And I used to love Liverpool Women's because you could always guarantee to get a cot. Yeah. And I was once really embarrassed because I got an award for the transport service to get to Liverpool Women's. What a service. Terrible, eh? But, you know, and I've also been plagued in my career when I was chief exec in Coventry, you know, perinatal mortality rate, and it will be affected by, you know, I don't think the comparisons are the right comparisons that get made between units. You know, if you've got a maternity unit in an affluent area, you'll have different results than you have in Liverpool or Coventry. So I think you're running a good service. I think, you know, I need to work with you to work out how we're actually going to get you on the right site as quickly as we possibly can. But we're talking later today. I've got some ideas, but I don't have any concerns. And the one thing I will say, I have seen this coming for years and years and years with maternity, because the politicians didn't know delivering babies existed. All they were interested in is waiting times, waiting list, and cancer performance. So there has been an underinvestment in maternity stretching back for years. So I look forward to working with you and how we can improve things for the population we serve. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, David. Very good. Sue, next, please.
Thank you, David. Just picking up on a couple of points. The neonatal mortality rate being 5% higher than the national average. And you've quite clearly explained why that's the case. However, as you've also touched on, there is a bit of a perception issue for potential mothers and the public about what that means. How do we actually communicate that in a way? How do we present that issue so that the underlying figures, the true figures, are, made known? So there's that point. The delays in induction of delivery, so a key issue for us, and also glad to hear that you're doing a deep dive into that and there's a bit of an action plan. But it'd be good to get some feedback at some point about what's been done and what progress has been achieved there. The gap analysis that's been undertaken on the Ockenden and the AMOS reviews. Again, it'd be interesting and useful to learn what the governance is around that and where that's going to be reported, and how the board gets oversight. And just finally, there is a lot, as you quite rightly say, coming out of those two reports in terms of recommendations, and you've got a good leadership to make sure those issues are dealt with. But there must be a resource issue here as well in terms of implementing those recommendations and the impact that it's going to have on the workforce. So how do we plan to address that? Thank you.
Thank you. So the neonatal mortality report and sharing with women, we've recently launched a new antenatal online education programme. We have a midwife that is leading on that, and we are currently in the process of doing an evaluation on it. The attendance rate and everything with that is phenomenal and the initial feedback we received is very positive, but we communicate everything through that programme with the aim of allaying fears. But one thing I have to say, since publication of these reports, the number of contacts that we're receiving from women through telephone triage, through our consultant midwives, through the community midwives, it has increased phenomenally. We cannot underestimate how these reports have also produced anxiety in women. And I see that, I absolutely see it, but the contact has increased phenomenally. Secondly, in terms of the induction of labour, we have a quality improvement programme that is ongoing on there. We have made extreme progress in comparison to 3 years, and we also regularly report that across the system to Cheshire and Mersey to share our learning points. Hence, any increase in that breach in 12-hour delays and induction of labour, we take very seriously, because it's very important to us, our patient experience and that engagement with women. We also work extremely closely with our MNVP, the Maternity Neonatal Voices Partnership, to make sure that we're reaching out to all women across the city. And in terms of the gap analysis with Ockenden and AMOS, thank you for highlighting that, because it is phenomenal work, especially from a governance perspective. We are going to manage this through a maternity improvement programme group, and yes, some resource will be. We've already got a meeting in the diary. Leanne has kindly arranged a meeting in the diary, and we will be seeing what we can do to identify the support that will be required for that maternity improvement performance group, so that we can ensure that there is focus and pace on achieving the improvements required.
Thank you.
Thank you. We missed Jackie, of course, in discussions like this as maternity champion, but also we will welcome back Louise Kenny soon, who was very much on this on the old Liverpool Women's board. So do you want to come on that point? I'm mid-sentence.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Okay. And so on the Embrace data, going back to when the Liverpool Women's met as a separate board, the Embrace data was a constant for agenda item. And the difficulty we had then, and I think it's even more difficulty that we have now in group board, is on this. I say this to illustrate the point. It's not a criticism of anything, a reflection, but we see the data, then we get a lot of our buts. Yeah, our but we have this specialist. And what that means is we have real difficulty moving from reassurance in the sort of answer to the our but to assurance about when you start to break this down and understand the different case mix that we deal with and the specialty services, how we do. And I think it's timely. Your report highlights it's timely, and Louise will come back and will be right on this, for us to think about how is there a better way that we can get as a committee and as a board real assurance on that, rather than, well, it would be like that because we've got all these different bits and pieces going on in Liverpool that others haven't. And it always feels a bit uncomfortable and unsatisfying at the end of those discussions. Helen, that's nothing to do with what you've done or said today. It's just something that it's timely for us to relook at how we can.
I think Leanne may have the answer, or part of the answer.
Yes, Leanne.
I sort of manage expectations there, Daniel, but I think if Jackie were here, what she'd say is what she's recommending for that assurance, David, is that we take a regional midwifery team to undertake a review of our data to provide that independent assurance. Previous reviews we have had on our data from Birmingham and from St Mary's MFT found no obvious reasons for our outlier status, but I think, but Helen will correct me, that was several years ago when that piece of work was done. With everything that's come out in the publications now, and we're not moving on that metric as much as we'd like, then it's time for a repeat of that, which is what I think Jackie would say if she was here. And
that's good. We're all coming back to the same place. That's good, David.
Yeah, in the past I've done this based on smoking in pregnancy. Look at that across the country.
Yeah. All of that. Okay, all good. So we'll think about how we schedule this piece of work, whether it's a regional review or whatever.
Yeah, we're scheduling quite a lot about the Ockenden and the AMOS review, about how do we bring that through this committee, but also the board over the next few months.
Yeah, okay, that's good then. I mean, just another reflection on all the media around that last week. I didn't think it was helpful. I know when Bill Kirkup, we were on the same board in 1993. I thought Bill publicly distanced himself from the report the day before publication, was a bit self-indulgent and not entirely out of character, not for the minute, or delete that from the recording. And it's just because, and then Donna Ockenden offering her view on Beverley's report, whatever the rights are wrong, it just doesn't help confidence and understanding. It doesn't help organisations move forward on that. There's clearly a debate around professional standards and all that that's ongoing, but this gap analysis and Jim's plan will get us back to the objectivity of the report.
Yeah. Can I just raise one quick? Helen, you talked about a approximately 20% increase in the last 6 months. Is that on which element of the service? Is that in basically maternity services?
Maternity assessment triage of pregnant women presenting with concerns during pregnancy. Yeah. And that is from the first 6 months of this year before these reports.
Yeah, so I suppose maybe a question for Leanne and Rob, given that we've raised, I think the PwC report we heard before, I think when they did that rapid financial diagnostic, raised that the national maternity tariff does not meet the full cost of maternity services. especially given the complexities that we've heard today. Given that there's been that increase, have we gone back to commissioners on that issue?
I don't know the answer to that, Daniel. Rob may have that, but if we haven't, I think it's something that it does make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it does make sense, particularly with all the publicity to keep it to accelerate and further highlight that point that you've made. That remains a live one, Daniel, but we've not had any traction on it. So it's probably an opportune time to push again, I think.
Yeah, so I think the complexity that Leanne and Heather have raised, the 20% increase, we know that this is an issue that we've raised before. It may just be an opportune moment to go back about the financial position of the organisations.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Well done, Leanne and Helen.